Warren Buffett once called the economics of his own private jet indefensible. Then he bought a quarter share of another one. 3 years later, Berkshire Hathaway acquired the entire company behind it for $725 million. That company was NetJets. At the time, it already controlled 163 aircraft and served more than 1,000 customers. A decade later, it was losing hundreds of millions of dollars, carrying nearly $2 billion of debt, and, by Buffett's own account, would not have survived without Berkshire's guarantee. Today, NetJets says it operates more than 1,400 flights a day across a network reaching more than 5,000 airports. So what did Buffett actually buy? Why did the business almost collapse? And how did a company built around private jets become a case study in networks, trust, and patient capital? The story begins long before Berkshire Hathaway. In 1964, a group of decorated military aviation leaders launched Executive Jet Airways. Among the founders were General Curtis LeMay, Paul Tibbets, and Bruce Sundlun, men whose careers had been shaped by aircraft, logistics, and command. The idea was ambitious for its time. Instead of treating business aircraft only as corporate property, Executive Jet Airways would provide managed access to a fleet. The company's operations took root in Columbus, Ohio, far from the celebrity image that would later surround private aviation. The early model offered charter and aircraft management services. It solved a useful problem, but the market remained limited. A company could own an aircraft, hire a crew, maintain it, insure it, and position it for every trip. Or it could charter when it needed to travel and accept whatever aircraft and availability the market offered. Both choices involved friction. Whole ownership delivered control, but it also meant absorbing the full cost and complexity of an asset that could sit unused for much of the year. Charter reduced the fixed commitment, but it could not always deliver the same aircraft, standards, or dependable availability. For roughly 2 decades, the missing product sat between those two extremes. The aircraft existed. The customers existed. The unsolved question was how to divide access without destroying the consistency that wealthy travelers were paying for. The breakthrough would come from someone who looked at airplanes less as symbols of luxury and more as variables in a system. Richard Santulli acquired the predecessor business in 1984. His background was in finance and leasing, and his advantage was not a new aircraft. It was a new way to model the fleet. Santulli studied flight activity, aircraft use, customer demand, and the hours an owner realistically needed. The insight was simple to describe, but difficult to operate. A customer did not necessarily need an entire airplane. The customer needed a dependable number of flying hours, a defined service standard, and confidence that an appropriate aircraft would be available. In 1986, the company introduced fractional aircraft ownership. Instead of buying 100% of a jet, a customer could purchase a share. That share translated into access, while the operator managed the aircraft, crews, maintenance, scheduling, and much of the administrative burden. But the important innovation was not merely dividing one aircraft into smaller pieces. A quarter owner was not relying on one specific airplane to finish every mission. The promise was supported by a larger fleet. Imagine 4 owners attached to one aircraft. Their schedules will eventually conflict. Now connect those owners to many aircraft of the same type, operating under one system. Add more customers, more aircraft classes, dispatch intelligence, trained crews, and maintenance coverage. The operator gains more ways to match each trip with a usable airplane. That is the network effect at the center of fractional aviation. It does not eliminate repositioning, weather, maintenance, or crew limits. It does not make aircraft cheap to operate. What it does is turn a collection of expensive, imperfectly utilized machines into a coordinated service. The customer buys time and certainty. The operator accepts the scheduling problem. That distinction changed the industry. It also created a business whose value was difficult to see from a balance sheet alone. The airplanes were visible. The accumulated demand data, operating procedures, and customer trust were not. By the mid-1990s, one of the world's most disciplined investors would experience that difference personally. Buffett's relationship with the company began as a customer, not an acquirer. According to Berkshire's 1998 annual report, Frank Rooney, then the head of Berkshire-owned H.H. Brown, recommended the service. In 1995, Buffett bought a quarter share of a Hawker 1000. That decision carried some irony. Buffett had previously criticized the expense of corporate aviation. He even named a Berkshire jet the indefensible, but the NetJets purchase exposed him to a different proposition. This was not simply a corporation owning one aircraft for occasional executive travel. It was access to a managed fleet with a service promise behind it. Buffett wrote that members of his family used the program extensively. Before Berkshire bought the company, the Buffett family had already taken hundreds of trips through it. That matters because NetJets was not sold to Buffett through a theoretical market forecast. It proved itself in repeated use. A private flight customer notices the details that do not fit cleanly into a spreadsheet, whether the aircraft arrives as promised, whether the cabin is consistent, whether the crew inspires confidence, whether a change in plans becomes a crisis, and whether someone answers when the trip becomes complicated. Every successful flight made the next purchase easier to trust. Buffett was seeing the product from inside the cabin while Santulli was operating the machinery behind it. One understood the value of dependable service. The other had built the system required to deliver it. In 1998, those two perspectives came together. Santulli contacted Buffett about selling the company to Berkshire Hathaway. The purchase price was $725 million, paid equally in cash and Berkshire stock. The scale was already substantial. Berkshire reported more than 1,000 customers and 163 aircraft. It also said the company accounted for 31% of worldwide corporate jet orders placed in 1997. Those figures explain why the acquisition was more than a purchase of airplanes. Berkshire was buying customer relationships, contracts, pilots, dispatch capability, maintenance systems, safety procedures, aircraft access, and years of operating knowledge. It was also buying a brand promise. When an owner called, the network would produce a flight. The cash and stock structure aligned Santulli with Berkshire while placing the company inside an organization known for long holding periods and decentralized management. On paper, the combination looked unusually strong. NetJets had invented its category and built early scale. Buffett understood the customer experience. Berkshire could provide credibility and capital that smaller competitors could not easily match. But capital can reinforce a good operating system. It cannot substitute for one. And beneath the visible growth was an increasingly complicated set of obligations. More owners meant more demand. More demand required more aircraft, more crews, more maintenance capacity, and more precise execution. The same network that created the advantage could magnify mistakes when growth outpaced discipline. To understand both the power and the danger, it helps to see the flywheel. Start with more owners. More owners generate more trip requests across more locations and times. That demand supports a larger and more diverse fleet. A larger fleet gives dispatchers more options to match aircraft with missions. Better matching improves availability and recovery when weather, maintenance, or schedule changes disrupt the original plan. Reliable availability strengthens customer trust. Trust supports retention, referrals, and additional demand. The cycle begins again. Scale can also spread major operating investments across a larger base. Training, safety systems, maintenance infrastructure, scheduling technology, and around-the-clock support are expensive. A network can justify capabilities that would be difficult for a small operator to reproduce. Berkshire added another layer, confidence that the promise could survive a downturn. For a customer committing serious money to future flying, the financial strength behind the operator matters. An aircraft share or long-term access program is less valuable if the provider may disappear when the economy contracts. But there is a tension inside the model. The customer wants immediate availability, consistent service, and as few restrictions as possible. The operator has aircraft in particular places, crews with legal duty limits, maintenance events that cannot be ignored, and demand that can surge in the same direction at the same time. Every guarantee has an operating cost. If prices, fleet commitments, staffing, and customer promises are calibrated correctly, The network becomes more useful as it grows. If they are not, scale can accelerate losses. A larger fleet does not automatically create better economics. It creates a larger system that must be scheduled, maintained, and paid for every day. For years, the Berkshire name helped NetJets grow. Then the financial crisis exposed how far the underlying economics had drifted. The numbers in Berkshire's 2009 shareholder letter were severe. Buffett wrote that across Berkshire's first 11 years of ownership, NetJets had produced an aggregate pre-tax loss of $157 million. Debt had grown from $102 million at the time of purchase to $1.9 billion in April 2009. For 2009 alone, NetJets recorded a pre-tax loss of $711 million. The global financial crisis was an obvious shock. Corporate travel budgets tightened, aircraft values fell, demand weakened. But Buffett did not place the entire blame on the economy. The business had expanded its fleet and cost structure too aggressively. Berkshire had guaranteed the company's debt, allowing NetJets to borrow at terms tied to Berkshire's strength. That support protected the operation, but it also meant Berkshire was standing behind decisions that had produced enormous risk. Buffett's assessment was unusually direct. Without Berkshire's guarantee, NetJets would have failed. This was not a bankruptcy filing. Berkshire had the resources to keep the company operating. But the statement revealed how close the economics had moved to the edge. The crisis also exposed a lesson that applies far beyond aviation. A strong parent company can give a subsidiary time. It cannot make recurring losses sustainable. The customer promise remained valuable. The brand remained valuable. The network remained valuable. Yet none of those assets excused poor fleet planning, excessive leverage, or a cost base disconnected from demand. Santulli left the company in 2009. Berkshire installed new leadership, reduced costs, and forced the operation to confront the economics beneath the growth story. The turnaround was rapid enough to change the meaning of the acquisition. In 2010, NetJets reported pre-tax earnings of $207 million. Compared with the $711 million loss in 2009, that represented a $918 million year-over-year swing. The recovery was not a result of one glamorous new aircraft or one advertising campaign. It came from restructuring, tighter operating discipline, and a better alignment between the fleet, the cost base, and actual customer demand. This is the part of the story that is easy to overlook. NetJets had genuine strategic advantages before the crisis. A recognized brand, an experienced workforce, a large customer base, and a network competitors would struggle to build quickly. But the turnaround showed that a moat still has to be operated. Scale is valuable only when management can convert it into dependable service at acceptable economics. Berkshire's capital prevented a short-term failure. Operational discipline made the long-term business viable again. The rescue also strengthened the promise at the heart of fractional ownership. Owners had chosen NetJets partly because they expected stability. Berkshire demonstrated that it could support the company through the worst period in its history and still demand change. That combination of patience and accountability helped turn a near disaster into infrastructure that is now extremely difficult to replicate. NetJets today describes an operating network that reaches more than 5,000 airports across more than 200 countries and territories, with more than 1,400 flights on an average day. In the United States, the company says its activity represents nearly 1 in every 6 business jet departures, with more than 1,000 domestic flights a day on average. Those figures are company reported, and they should be understood as a current snapshot rather than a permanent guarantee. But they show the scale of the system Berkshire now owns. The modern advantage is not limited to fleet size. It includes pilot recruitment and training, maintenance capacity, weather and dispatch operations, safety programs, customer service teams, technology, and the institutional knowledge created by coordinating thousands of changing missions. NetJets says it expects more than 80 new aircraft in 2026. It has also announced plans to equip roughly 600 aircraft with high-speed satellite connectivity. These investments reinforce the same promise Santulli designed decades ago. The customer wants the trip to feel simple, even though the system behind it is extraordinarily complex. For a competitor, buying aircraft is only the first step. It must also find qualified crews, build maintenance coverage, create scheduling and recovery systems, earn customer confidence, and finance the operation through economic cycles. Each layer takes time. Together, they form a barrier that cannot be copied with an app and a marketing budget. That does not make NetJets invulnerable. Aircraft remain capital-intensive. Labor, fuel, maintenance, and regulation remain real constraints. Customer expectations remain unforgiving. But Berkshire is no longer backing a promising experiment. It is backing a mature operating network whose invisible infrastructure may be more valuable than the aircraft customers see. So, what did Warren Buffett buy for $725 million? Not simply 163 aircraft, he bought a network, a scheduling system, a base of committed customers, an operating culture, a stream of demand data, and a promise that the company would solve a difficult logistical problem every time an owner needed to move. He also bought a business capable of making very expensive mistakes. NetJets nearly became a warning about growth protected by unlimited capital. Instead, the 2009 crisis forced Berkshire to complete the acquisition in a deeper sense, not just funding the company, but making its operations worthy of the promise. That is why the story matters. Private aviation looks glamorous from the cabin. The durable advantage lives somewhere else, in dispatch rooms, maintenance hangars, training centers, financing decisions, and thousands of small operational choices the passenger never sees. Buffett's best insight may not have been recognizing the luxury of a private flight. It was recognizing the value of an invisible system that could make one reliably happen. This is the empty leg.